Hey guys, it's EJ with Blockpad, and today, as part of our video series on arrays, we're taking a look at functions for sorting and filtering. Now, the first three I want to cover are where, first, and last. And my example array here, times, is just going to be a one-dimensional array of these time values, which are essentially number values that have time units. Now, the where function is going to return all of the values in an array that meet the given criteria. And you can give that criteria as a comparison function, like kind of shorthand like this, with just less than 5 minutes, for example, or as a full inline function, which I have a video that you can watch on that subject. But here's an example. My inline function is t maps to 2 minutes less than t is less than 7 minutes. So that's going to give me all of the times that are between 2 minutes and 7 minutes. The first and last functions are going to work similar to where, except that they give the first value that meets that criteria and the last value that meets that criteria. So here, if you notice for these first and last functions, I have the same criteria as this one. And first is going to return the first value from that array, and last is going to return the last value from that array. But note that this is not returning the largest or smallest value from the arrays. It's just going to be in the order that the array is in. If you want, for example, first to return the lowest value that meets that criteria, then those values are going to need to be sorted first. So with that, let's move on to the sort function. Now the sort function will work on a one-dimensional array like times. So for example, if I go back up here and do sort of times, close parentheses, then that's going to sort that array. If you pass it a two-dimensional array like this, then it's going to sort by that first column, and it's going to sort all of the row values with their corresponding values from that column. So for example, Bob is now first in line, but he still has the height value and he still drives a Toyota that he originally had. Now, for all these examples, I went ahead and created this matrix here where I'm referencing table1.a2 to c5. That's all I'm doing in this step so that I'm going to use that later. So again, if I want people in alphabetical order, then I can just do sort of just that array, and that's the same thing that's happening here. I can also give a second input that will specify which column to sort by. So here, if I give it a 2, that's going to be the second column that it's sorting by. So now it's giving me those heights in ascending order. And then if I have a third input, if I pass in a negative number, it's going to do it in descending order. So here it's the same as this, just backwards, going in descending. So that's sort. We also have a filter function. Now, the first option for the filter function is a little bit redundant. If you just pass it an array and a conditional function, like what we had for where and first, etc., then it's going to work essentially the same as where. It's not really working any different. Now, if you want it to filter out by the rows, so for example, here, instead of just giving me all the values that are Toyota, say I want all of the rows that have that Toyota value in the third column, then for my second input, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to put in the column index you want to filter by. So here I just type in 3, or you want to put in the column itself. So here I have people, and then I use parentheses indexing to get the third column. In most cases, it's going to be shorter and more straightforward just to type in the column index, so that's what I suggest. But I put this here because sometimes that is useful in certain scenarios. And then as my third option here, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just referencing the table ranges directly. So If you remember, people is the same as table1.a2 to c5. And then table1.c2 to c5 is going to be that third column. There's also an option to filter by columns instead of by rows. And to do this, you're going to pass the row in as the second input. So here I have people, then I'm passing in the second row of people. And in my requirements here, it's looking at all of the items in that row and determining if they're not a number. And if it is a number, it's going to get filtered out. And if they're not a number, it's going to be retained, and that whole column is going to be retained. So this, for example, is a way of filtering out that height column. So that's using filter. The last thing I want to cover in this video is just a little example I put together of what I think is a relatively practical situation, albeit a little bit simplified here, where I have this requirement and I want to find the option that meets a requirement and then the other properties from that option. So specifically here, I have this required volume, and if I were to just do this manually, I would look in the table and see, okay, this meets that requirement. That's option E, and these are the base diameter and fill height. But in this example here, we're going to take a look at doing that automatically instead of manually, using a lot of the functions that we've been learning in this array video series, including indexing functions, sorting and filtering functions, and lookup functions. So to start looking at this, I'm going to select these equations, and I had the show result set to no so that to save space, but I'm going to change that to yes for these first few steps. So the first thing I do is create an array named buckets that's referencing this table range, so that way we can just use a nice clear name. And then I sort that array buckets. I create a new array buckets by volume, and I sort it based off of the fourth column. So now I have my volume sorted from smallest to largest. If you'll note, that puts my options out of order. Now they're A, C, B. And then I also have this array here that's just volume sorted. And all that is using the parentheses indexing of buckets by volume and the fourth column there. So I'm going to go ahead and hide these two, go back to properties, show result to no, or I should say hide their result. We'll keep volume sorted for reference. So I have volume meets requirement, and this is the volume that meets my minimum requirement. That's going to be using the function first of volume sorted is greater than the volume required. So remember, volume required is 2.5 gallons. So I get my 2.611 gallon. And because I sorted my volumes first, this is giving me the lowest value that meets this requirement, not just the first one in an arbitrary order. So next, I want to find the option that meets that requirement. So what I'm going to do is use the index function, and the array I'm using it on is buckets by volume, and I'm going to pass it a row and a column. For the row, I use the match function to find out what row I want, and that match function is looking at the volume meets requirement and the volume sorted. So it sees that this volume that meets the requirement is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 index in that row. So it's the fifth one in the row. And that's going to be what I pass as my row. And then I just pass in 1 for the column because I'm looking at the first column here. So for that, I get E. And then from there, it's pretty simple VLOOKUP stuff. I have VLOOKUP exact, the option that meets the requirement. I'm using buckets, and then I want the second column and then the third column for base diameter and fill height, respectively. So now I'm going to go ahead and hide this, show result to no, close the properties window, So now if I change my volume required to, for example, 4 gallons, then I'm going to have all of this updated for me. It's going to give me my new option, the volume that meets requirement. It's going to work like that. Similarly, if I change this to 0.75, then I get my new options there. So that's all I've got for you guys today. I'm going to share a link to this file in the description, and I'm also going to put a bunch of other links to the other videos on arrays and also just useful stuff on our website. So that's all I've got. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Thank you.